Okay, everyone, we have reached the bottom of the hour, so let's get started with today's LTEN webinar, Connecting with Your Customers in 2023, an interactive discussion for training leaders, sponsored by CMR Institute. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm Editorial Director for LTEN. It's my pleasure to welcome you today, serve as a host of our webinar. I'm going to start with some quick housekeeping items, and then we're going to turn things over to our speakers. We are planning a 60-minute session for you today. You'll notice that your phones are on mute, so any questions, any comments you have, please do let us hear from you. Just type them into the questions box on the control panel. Should be on the right side of your screen. Type them in, hit submit. We'll receive the question and we'll get to them as quickly as possible throughout today's program. And we'd love to hear from you with any questions or any comments you have. I also wanted to point out a handouts window on the control panel. There's a copy of an LTEN 2023 events calendar is there now. I'm going to share that with you later in today's program as well, but you're welcome to download that copy. You can just highlight the title and it will walk you through downloading to your desktop. If you have any questions with that, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to help you get that handout offline. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in the LTEN Self-Directed Learning Library. I'm going to share an email with you. I'm going to share the address for that Self-Directed Learning Library with you later in today's program, and you'll be able to look for that webinar recording also on the LTEN website later today as well. And speaking of sharing, a follow-up survey is going to appear on a separate browser window as you leave today's program. So when you do leave today's webinar, please do look for that survey and quickly share your thoughts with us. We produce these programs for you, and we always appreciate your feedback. And along those lines, again, there's my email address. I will share that later in today's program as well. If I can help with anything around the webinar or your LTEN membership, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our speakers today. Let me pass things over to our moderator, Michelle O'Connor. Michelle is president and CEO of CMR Institute, and she's a member of the LTEN Board of Directors. Michelle, thanks for joining us today.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Tim. And I want to start out just by thanking our esteemed panel of speakers for your willingness to share your expertise with us today. And we're delighted to have you all here. I'd love for you to take a minute, introduce yourself, and tell a little bit about maybe your interest in this particular topic. Jason, let's start with you.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Michelle. Glad to be a part of the conversation and part of this wonderful panel. I'm Jason Gaines, the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development, currently at Intermountain Health. Former roles in corporate development, innovation, and strategy. Really, I'm a healthcare strategist and partnership builder at heart. And that's been the bulk of my career, but spent a decade plus on your side of the table, if you will, was with Sanofi and predecessor companies and account management and sales manager roles and such. So it's been a fun conversation in preparation for today to really think about how can I share what I know to help you all bring additional value to your customers. I'm a proponent of saying we need more of a kind of a swinging door, meaning an open door policy between healthcare institutions and the broader life science ecosystem. We need help, we being IDNs and hospital systems and all healthcare constituents. We can't solve it on our own. And at this point in my career, I'm really trying to be a change agent for health systems to say we need to do a better job of inviting bright, creative companies and folks to the table to help us solve the thorniest problems vexing American healthcare today. And I think today's slides are really built around that, meaning what are those topics and how do we work together to help address some of these challenges. So glad to be with you all and looking forward to the conversation. Troy?
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. And thank you, Michelle and Tim, for the opportunity to be here. My interest in this is I still look at the world as an old-fashioned sales guy. And when I look at customers' needs, which is where every sales effort should start, I see that the needs have changed for our customers. With the passage of the Affordable Care Act, with the demographics in America today, with 1,000 people becoming eligible for Medicare benefits every single day, 1,000 new people like that. What the customer needs has changed, and it's important for us to understand that. And I think foundational to being able to engage the customer on their level is being able to have a business conversation, not just talk about our products, but be able to understand how our products help them do business better. So I've been passionate about that. We've seen success with that. Some of you have heard me talk about that and write about that in the past, so I'm happy to talk some more about it today.
Hi, everybody. So as the lone female on the panel here, I'm delighted to be, along with obviously Michelle, who's moderating everything, delighted to be with Jason and Troy. And thank you, Michelle and LTEN for having me. So my name is Eimear and last name is Kivlighn. I tell everybody, think of the bone, the femur, and pop an E instead of the F in front of my name. Originally from Ireland, for those of you who might hear a bit of an accent. I've been in the industry a very long time. I spent 30 years at Merck with all the usual jobs that one does when they spend that long in corporate America, sales management, and spent a lot of time as an account director calling on the institutions that Jason is now Jason is at in the senior level role. I came back to my first love. I'm a teacher by training. I came back to the education side of things about 6 years ago. And business training, business acumen training is very near and dear to my heart. And I hope to have the opportunity to talk to you all today about the experiences that I've had bringing a large organization a few years ago on board with the business acumen curriculum, and now most recently at Novavax, where I am the Associate Director of Training. So looking forward to the discussion, and thank you again for having me.
Right, fantastic. Thank you all for being here. All right, well, let's jump in and get started. So when we look at what we want to cover today, we are going to look at the key drivers of change within healthcare systems and the broader ecosystem in general, and really look at practices for how you can train your sales teams to more effectively help your customers deal with those challenges. So there's our learning objectives for the day. And before we dive in, we would like to ask a question of the audience. So if we could go to the next slide. What we'd like for you to do is tell us what you think are the chief concerns of healthcare leaders today. What are the types of things that keep them up at night? You know, what are you hearing from the field? What are you hearing from your sales leaders? If you would take just a minute and chat that out in your chat box. It'll be interesting to see if they align with what our speakers are going to be covering today. Okay, staffing, money, challenges, supply, price for medications that they need. That's a common challenge. The reimbursement, new technologies, how you find people that are effective, and how can you make the people I have more effective? Okay. Building trust with those for those they want to collaborate with. That's a great one too as well. Okay. All right. So I know that that we are going to cover some of these, but building a more cohesive culture just came in as well. I think those are really excellent points, and we'll try to tap on those today. All right, thank you. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you just to walk us through some of the challenges that healthcare systems are facing today, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Some of these themes will look familiar to you all if you're reading your local newspaper or Becker's or if you're awake, quite frankly, right? I mean, these are pervasive themes in healthcare today. And whether you're at Intermountain, Alina, Henry Ford, wherever healthcare leaders may be on the delivery side, these are very common topics. And I'll go, cover each of these briefly. But I mean, this morning, there was a headline, I think it was the Becker's headline, that Common Spirit reported a $451 million loss in the second half of last year. That's not 4.5, that's 451 million. You may have seen, I think it was last Thursday, Kaiser reported a $4 billion loss in 2022. A $4 billion loss from a very, very good health system. And I could go on and cite the woes of others, but those are two big names in healthcare who are well regarded, and they are losing billions of dollars or $500 million respectively. And so to say that hospital financial performance lags pre-22 levels or 2019 was kind of this high watermark, right? We're not getting back to that. I mean, it's illusionary to think that we are going to get back as a healthcare delivery network to 2019 levels of hospital performance. It won't happen. And so it is a major kind of regating and recalibration for hospital systems right now. I asked us formally at Intermountain Health to quit using 2019 as a standard, because it's like me wanting to use, a 400-meter time from when I was, 20 years old. I can't run a 400 meters that fast ever again. So why do we continue to look at that as the high water mark? And so, all hospital systems are really trying to think about what their future performance is, and furthermore determine how much of a run rate, meaning how much historical data can they use to forecast the future. So that's most certainly a trend. Volumes shifting to an ambulatory setting. For any of you out there in the audience today that are in an orthopedic market, or you have an orthopedic service or product, what's your biggest market? Is it hospitals or is it ASCs? It's probably ASCs, right? And that wasn't the case 5 years ago. And I use orthopedics as a really easy target to say, here's been the shift from inpatient to outpatient to ambulatory, but others are following. You've seen hospital systems open cardiology only ASCs in the last 6 months. And that was this novel, I wonder if we can do that concept 3 years ago, and now they're in market. And we didn't even know if that would be a relevant player to have ambulatory surgical centers focused on cardiology. So this shift to ambulatory from inpatient to hospital outpatient, or HOPD, right, to ambulatory has been much more accelerated than any of us would have predicted. Why is that important? You're like, okay, Jason, isn't that really good for patients? It is, right? Lengths of stay decrease, costs go down, but it changes the structure and the revenue cycle management for hospitals, and it's a really pressing matter. And as a result of those two things, hospitals are really needing to cut costs. I mean, you cannot literally, every single day for the last several months, you read about a hospital that's downsizing. I'm here in Colorado today. I'm sitting in downtown Denver in a large urban hospital, 400-bed hospital, St. Joseph, part of the Intermountain portfolio. And one of our major competitors announced yesterday they're breaking up. All the hospitals are breaking up, and it's falling apart. Common Spirit and the Adventist, you saw that, and that's a sign of some of the pressure in the market. So there are cost-cutting measures. Hospitals are decreasing services. Hospitals are changing. For-profit systems are changing the patients they're seeing, and that "what insurer do you have" question is becoming increasingly important for some. Again, typically for-profit systems. Nonprofits aren't doing that as much because they shouldn't and aren't able to. What about the adoption of automation and AI? I sat in a breakfast meeting today, earlier this morning, with the CEO of Intermountain, who just spoke to a program where there is an ambient, I'll grossly, oversimplify this, an ambient speaker in the room, if you will, that listens to the interaction between a provider and a patient, and then dictates and fills the chart note for them. Think about that. And what that's done in our initial pilot, decreased daily note taking for providers by 2 hours. 2 hours a day by provider when a note got filled on that patient interaction. That is a quality of life game changer for providers. And that is one, I use that just on the provider side of AI. We could spend the next several hours talking about all of the places AI is impacting healthcare in a meaningful way. And by and large, it's very encouraging. Mergers and acquisitions. I'm sitting here, I mentioned I'm in an Intermountain Health facility. A year ago, I was sitting at the same desk at the same hospital, and it was an SCL Health facility. So Intermountain SCL, Advocate Aurora, Fairview Allina. The merger list just goes on. And these aren't small mergers, y'all. These are, all of those have been, the three I just rattled off are all north of 5. In fact, they're all probably north of $7 or $8 billion mergers. So these are big. The small mergers have happened by and large. Now we're seeing major, very well-established systems coming together for these mega mergers, and that will continue. And we'll talk later in the presentation about the why, what's driving that, and why do you merge? And then lastly, The shift to value-based care, really important work. This is the savior. This is the cavalry on the horizon for American healthcare. You know, American healthcare has a $4 trillion spend, right? 19.7% of our GDP, 92% of Americans have insurance. Why are we still failing as a system if nearly everyone's insured? Why is it 20% of GDP if our uninsured rate's less than 8% or less than 10%, let's say? The reason is we're still locked in a more is better healthcare paradigm, right? That every fee-for-service system is increasingly antiquated, which is to say that we have to reimburse payers. Insurers should not be allowed to be successful in a fee-for-service model. But why aren't we moving faster? The shift to value, and I sit here as part of the system that's maybe out, you know, one of the 2 or 3 leaders in the country on this. It's incredibly challenging. And how do we align all incentives to decrease unnecessary care and to keep people healthy and to keep them in their homes and to keep them in their communities? This is a lift that, you know, maybe, I mean, a business lift or a sector lift that American society has never dealt with, to say we are radically going to change the biggest business in America, which is moving from fee for service to fee for value. And it's costly, and it's really challenging and incredibly disruptive. So those are, you know, kind of 6 trends. I could go on and we'll touch on a few more. There are probably 16 more. I think these are the 5 or 6 biggest that are real, that whether your customer, again, is in New York or Southern California or Montana or, you know, Missouri, these are pervasive themes, and we're going to hopefully talk and enable you to think about how do you tie a product or a service to these themes today. So I mentioned kind of what's driving that M&A activity, right? And I mentioned a breakup in the local market here in Colorado yesterday. And so what's important to think about here is, you know, this desire to lower costs, the sharing resources, that really is deduplication of services, right? This is, and what does that mean? So when you first met somebody or when you're meeting somebody, you know, at some point you move in together, right? In part and for a lot of reasons, but what happens when, you know, you get married and all of a sudden there's 1 rent or 1 mortgage instead of 2, and there's 1 electric bill instead of 2. The same things happen for IDNs and hospital systems. You know, you deduplicate human resources, you reduce the financial team, credentialing, supply chain, the list goes on and on and on about the deduplication of services that can happen in a common market. You know, I mentioned again the Centura, Common Spirit, and Advent Health breakup. What's going to happen to those hospitals for that health system that just broke up? When they go to negotiate a rate with United Healthcare next year, are they going to have the leverage to say we need a 3% year-over-year rate increase? No, they are going to see a decrease in how they are paid. So that's the converse, right? Of, well, if they were bigger, they can say to United, you have to have us. We cover the vast majority of these rural markets or of this geography, therefore we demand a rate increase. Well, this kind of arbitration of sorts, if you will, the negotiation of payer rates favors the elephant in the room. The bigger the system, the more leverage they have with a payer because they can demand it. Why? Because United, and I use United, I'm not picking on United for any, but Cigna, you name it, has to have that network. Otherwise, the local self-insured employer who's purchasing that product won't purchase it, right? If those hospitals locally aren't in the United product, they won't. So that's how that kind of, you hear a lot about this, but some folks, you know, don't fully understand why that happens. Well, the bigger the system is, the more heft and weight they carry for insurer conversations, and that's why M&A is happening in large part, if not the predominant reason. I would make an economist vantage point that is the primary reason. And then lastly, streamlining care and administration, right? We have oversupplied America with CT machines and stuff. You know, there's been some really interesting evaluations and studies of this that look at the number of MRI machines in large metropolitan areas, and you compare it to other countries and nations. We do not need an MRI, you know, next to every Starbucks, and we're not quite there, but where there's a preponderance of really expensive technology that does not need to be as widespread as it is. What about improvements in care quality? You know, you see service line, you see coordination of care, and you've got kind of center of excellence mentality that pops up following a merger meeting we can have. a heart center of excellence. We can have an oncology service of excellence, or center of excellence, excuse me. And so there is a lot of kind of intellectual property and you can bring more subspecialists to a larger system, right? Because you can keep them busy. If I'm a small system and I have an electrophysiologist team, can I keep them busy, or is that work being done by general cardiology? And you could extrapolate that to the specialties you're selling within. And then protocolization of medicine that's good for patients. This isn't cookbook medicine that sometimes gets played out in political campaigns, but standardization and protocolization is good by and large, right? To paint with a broad brush. That happens with larger systems in a way that just simply can't happen in smaller systems. And then lastly, here we sit in February of 2023, the customer preference has changed and staffing side. I mean, if you look at the AMA, the American Medical Association, they project a shortfall of primary care doctors in the next 10 years by 20 to 50,000 in America. That AMA says we're going to be 20 to 50,000 providers short in primary care in the next 10 years. And by 2025, we're going to be 300,000 to 400,000 nurses short. Think about that for just a second. 2025 is like next week, right? We're going to have a shortage. So what that means is we have to change the model. If those are the facts, and we know that Medicare is growing at the rate it is, which we'll talk about, we have to change the way we're delivering care. And so this viability today, this final box here, is really addressing some of these market supply and demand changes. So I hope that helps kind of frame what's driving M&A and activity and why, because you're just going to see more and more of it regardless of where you're listening in from today. So what is the role of data in this? What is your role in data as partners, as life science organizations? I would tell you that product value, and let me get on my stump speech here, and if you take one thing away from today's talk, I think product value, product or service, for some of you selling services versus a product, or software as a service even, product value must be tied to larger data sets. And so, what does he mean by that, right? And I like this phrase, and I'm kind of working on a paper that I want to put out on this called Beyond the Molecule. And so if you're bringing a molecule, if you're bringing an entity, a drug, if you will, to your provider set, or your KOL, or your largest health system, and expecting a KOL to take that molecule and make it wildly popular within a health system, I don't think you're doing, the job that you could be doing, or it's really setting the trajectory. It's more about, here's the molecule, here's the product, here's the population it serves, here's how you as a health system interact with that population, and here's the longitudinal data that we have to prove how this addresses your key performance indicators, right? There are 64 million Medicare enrollees in the United States right now. Every health system, nearly every, there's some just, I guess, serving commercial population, but all those health systems are addressing a Medicare population. And unlike the good old days when there was one provider who sold longitudinal data sets, Troy and others will remember that, now there are all these companies that pharma companies and others are buying longitudinal data sets from. So you can buy the data set and help a health system understand how your product can affect the market that they are serving. And this is a real opportunity for you, because we on the hospital and the care delivery side are terrible at this. We do not have the data management infrastructure to, how many of you, I wish I could see you all by a show of hands, how many of you have heard doctors say, I hate EMRs? And that hatred is product agnostic, meaning they hate Cerner, they hate Allscripts, they hate Epic, right? Why? Because what they put into that, I mentioned being saved 2 hours a day earlier in the conversation, they are doing a lot of work to put data in, but it's not being leveraged into value. Value, they would define, help me make decisions with that EMR for my patients. You have the capability, I would argue, to use real world data, understand kind of the HEOR implications and other things, and then relate that to the health system's goals. Longitudinal data sets are available for you to turn into value for your product or service. That's where we need help. We're going to get into this more later in the talk, but it's a tremendous opportunity.
Did we lose Jason?
Lost him.
Michelle, while we're getting Jason back, I'm happy to speak to the quintuple aim. I think that everyone here has some familiarity with what started out with Dr. Berwick back when he was at the IHI with the triple aim, and that was improving population health, improving the standard of care, and then improving outcomes. And today we've seen this move all the way into the quadruple aim, which now added the consideration for the providers and the ability for providers to be able to also assess their happiness, their quality, their environment. And now we've added health equity. And I would say that depending on who you're talking to, that the health equity piece would take and could include anything from an ESG standpoint, environmental sustainability, globalization. We hear a lot about the ESG principles out there. So now this is all part of this North Star, if you will, of where we're trying to go with healthcare. How are we getting there? This is meant to give us aligning behaviors, aligning principles that we can follow. So are we improving outcomes? Are we able to reduce costs? Not the cost of our products, the cost of care, especially across populations, to Jason's previous point there, as well as are people having a good experience? We hear a lot about the commercialization, making it very patient friendly, the retail aspect of healthcare today. And then is it sustainable? Do we have the right people? Are we taking care of our providers? Jason mentioned also the shortage of family practitioners and GPs that we have going forward. Well, how do we not burn out the ones that we have there and make that happen? And then it's very well documented that social determinants of health and other pieces, that access to healthcare, geographic and other demographic challenges have limited some of the impact of healthcare and the ability of people to access it and get quality care like that. So we put this out there, and for us as salespeople or as sales trainers, on the corporate side for what we're doing here, to help us to align and understand this is where the Intermountains, Jason's organization, especially on his side with business development, with what he's doing, he looks at these principles and says, what businesses, what resources, what corporate strategy, they all have to align in some way to one of these 5 principles, or to as many of them as possible as they make investments and they look to move forward like that. So if this is something that is new to you, I encourage you to spend some more time digging in to the quintuple aim. I would also encourage you to spend time reading annual reports and understanding how your sales targets, your accounts, are going to align around this. They'll tell you, it's out there, it's published, and they'll give you great places for you to start your conversations there. I don't know, Eimear, anything there to add?
I think, well, I'll hold my comments, I think, for a moment too, but yes, I mean, the bottom line is that the world of business acumen training, you cannot ignore it anymore for all of the reasons. If you have been ignoring it or putting it on the back burner, or it's not an integral part of your curriculum, you cannot possibly think that you're going to be anyway successful in the current landscape if you are not integrating into the larger curriculum, whatever that might look like, and we can talk about that, the whole idea of understanding your customers' business priorities and the business landscape in which they operate. It's not possible to set yourself and your team up for success.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of bring this all home here for what this means for us in the audience and as we're looking at things. So yeah, just back one slide, whoever's running the slides there, please. So should you guys, there we go, perfect. So should we care about this? I think everyone here, if you are a customer-focused type company, meaning, and for all the trainers here, you got to think about, put yourself in salespeople's shoes. Do you need to know all these things? Yes. Do you need to be experts in these things? Absolutely not. But this is what is on the minds of your customers today. So when you look at this, you're going to want to consider, how do we have and provide access to things like population health? And I mentioned social determinants of health, all these factors, EHR, again, like Jason was saying, it really doesn't matter which vendor they're using. They universally dislike what EHRs are doing for them right now, because they haven't been able to operationalize it and make it something that's affecting patient outcomes yet. Hopefully that's coming like that. So each of us here want to be able to figure out, how can I introduce elements of this into our training curriculum? And I think that's what the second part of the conversation is going to be about. Hey, Jason, it's great to have you back. I just provided a couple comments on the quintuple aim, and maybe you could just offer your thoughts on, should a salesperson come in and say, hey, Jason, we're going to help you achieve the quintuple aim, or how should they use that as they approach a professional like yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Troy. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, y'all, but I make one comment that we're terrible at ISIT and my computer crashes and goes black. So I don't know if that was related or not, but I just hope full system failure, just black screen after saying that. So I'm starting to look over my shoulder. So apologies for the sudden departure, and thanks, Troy, for helping me out. Great question. And I would say that question of, should you approach a customer about wanting to discuss the quintuple aim, or what's next, the sextuple aim, and then septuple aim, we'll keep adding to that, right? I think it really depends on the key performance indicators and the board dashboard for whatever system you're talking to, right? Does that system have goals in place? Have you read in their annual report, have you talked to one of their administrators and said, we're trying to do something about, healthcare equity? Have they said our number one problem is provider burnout and, things like that? So I would say you need to do a little homework before answering that question. The National Institute of Health reported depression and anxiety rates of 25 to 30% amongst nurses during the pandemic. That hasn't gone away. We thought, hey, this was a pandemic effect, it'll go away. Here we sit again where we are now, and there's still a lot of kind of angst and concern amongst healthcare workers. Can your product help that? Meaning, does it make their lives easier and better? Does it have a patient benefit that reduces their workload every day? So I think when you think about, those things, it's really a call to better understand your customer, and especially as it relates to population health and social determinants. I'll tell you, the more systems than not won't care about population health, right? They'll see that as a threat. If you say, hey, we can decrease your 30-day readmissions, we can decrease admissions, we can keep people out of your EDs. Sad as it is to say, some folks will say, that's not what we want, Troy. Eimear, we want people in our EDs because we're in a competitive, that's one of the front doors to admissions, and the hospital system down the street will gladly open their ED if we don't. So you really have to understand the priority of the health system, and more specifically, that means, what are the KPIs of that hospital? What are they reporting to the board on? And what are they putting in their annual report? And then think, okay, now I understand, and now I can speak their language.
Great comments. Great. Jason, the comment you just made right there about the perverse incentives in the system really underscore what you said before about the challenges we face as a country in moving towards value-based care. And I know as we proceed here, I think that finding those centers that are truly trying to embrace value-based care, or places like California or Maryland that have more advanced payment models, finding those centers that need help to break some of those perverse arrangements like that. If you've got solutions that help them to do that, I tell you, you'll get access to the C-suite right away if you can help them achieve some of that. Absolutely.
Great call out, Troy. Yeah. So we've talked about a few of these things about aging population and nursing and physician shortages, right? This slide, I would tell you in the simplest of terms, is you look at these 4 bullet points, and I won't read them to you. This is why CVS just paid $10.6 billion for One Medical, right? That happened 2 weeks ago or so. CVS is moving towards a vertically integrated model where they own the provider, the pharmacy benefit manager, the pharmacy, right? And so the reason Oak Street, now I said One Medical, that's a different merger, right? Oak Street, who are they? They are a physician group that has proven in a Medicare population to decrease hospitalizations and ED visits both by greater than 50%, not in a clinical trial, but across tens of thousands of patients in multiple markets. and and physicians love it. They have a net promoter score of greater than 90. That's like HCAHPS or CGCAHPS. If you aren't familiar with what a net promoter score is, it's just the 5-star rating for Hilton, right? And so they have decreased admissions, decreased ED visits while keeping patients very happy. That is the secret sauce, right? That's kind of the end of the rainbow for health systems. So that addresses supply and demand. If we figured out how to scale this model that lowers costs and keeps people healthier while improving satisfaction, the original triple aim, right, to get back to kind of the core, then if that's scalable, that is how health systems will be successful in the market and attract insurers and self-insured employers in particular, and move to the front of the kind of the competitive race. So that, so understand that these 4, kind of the intricacies and the overlap of these 4 call outs, these 4 bullets, and how health systems are trying to figure that out. And then how does your product or service address those specifically? Because this is really the big picture, right? Of, hey, I can help you do all of these things. And if you can't, I'm fond of saying, hey, if you can only address 2 of the 3, great. But hey, Troy, don't tell me you can do 3 of 3 if you can't, right? Tell me, hey, we don't think we can improve your patient satisfaction scores. What we can do is lower costs and keep people out of your ED. I'm still very interested, right? And you'll gain a lot of respect with customers of, with equal candor saying, I've looked at your KPIs, there are 6 of them. I think our product can affect 3 of them positively. The other 3, I think, are neutral, or we can't have an impact on your provider burnout. That's not what our product will impact. That's a different conversation to have that level of candor and that level of kind of knowledge of a customer, and I think will bring you a lot of value.
I'm going to jump in here with a comment, and Michelle maybe is coming up on the next slide, but I'm going to kind of bring it back to like the training function, right? So we're hearing a lot about the complexity that's in the marketplace, and we're not going to come in and solve all of Jason's problems. We're not going to solve all the problems for all these IDN, very complicated health systems. But I think what we can do is, to the comment I made a moment ago, is that ensure that as we are training our people, so whether they are new hires or they're enrolled, regardless of whether they are market access, trade and distribution, a sales rep, a field reimbursement manager, whoever they may be in your organization, that the mindset is one of consultative selling. And consultative selling, the way you get there is to expand the training experiences that you are giving your people, right? So consultative selling comes when you move away from this transactional, pure clinical conversation and the training that we give around that all the time, so that people understand as they walk into a Jason or a Troy, whomever the customer may be, that there are other additional major business drivers that are impacting the decisions that they make. And so therefore, as trainers, we need to be on the forefront of training our new hires or enroll about really understanding business dynamics, the evolving marketplace trends, the needs of our customers, and then finding the right learning paths and journeys and the right vendor partners to build a foundational curriculum where everybody is level set. And then you are also working with your internal stakeholders at your organization to get the buy-in and the advocacy to allow you then to build deeper where necessary to give your different teams the expertise building that they need to have an intelligent conversation, to ask the right questions, so that they then begin to develop consultative relationships with customers. We're not going to solve all of this, but we are a piece of the puzzle, and you do not want to, at this day and age, think that just a clinical story will do it, because it won't, for all of the reasons that Jason and Troy have been commenting on. So I just wanted to make it kind of an overarching kind of training comment there about how do you begin to kind of move forward on this, because this can seem very overwhelming.
Yeah. And Michelle, can I offer just one comment about that to the training folks? And this is a pure training, maybe a training leadership comment here. A lot of us have needs-based sales process that we teach, be it integrity, challenger, consultative selling, everything that Eimear just said. And that's absolutely correct. And so we'll have people go through product training, then they'll go through sales training. The challenge that we have here is oftentimes our product training is designed, we look at how a rep was successful or how a couple reps are successful, we backward engineer it and we say, all right, this is the way you do this. And these are the questions you want to ask. And these are the features that you want to lead with. And these are the critical points that are going to make a difference. And all that's really, really important. But understand, many of us out there, we really teach people to be hammers. And if the customer's a nail, you're going to have success. But if the customer is, a screw or a bolt or a nut or something else like that, they're not going to have the ability. You can teach them consultative selling, but they're not going to have the foundational mastery. And that's what Eimear is talking about. You need to give them everything they need. You want to teach them to be a multi-tool. You want to teach them to be a leatherman, so that they can be a knife, they can be a screwdriver, they can be a hammer when they need to, based on what the customer needs at that time. And that's different than the way a lot of us train today. We're going to talk more about that in the coming slides, but it's probably the most important takeaway I could offer for the training leaders that are on this call, to do a true diagnostic on what you're training right now. How much are you actually training people to be out there and to be able to have business conversations versus getting them out there to do repeat behaviors that you think are going to lead to sales?
And I'm going to make one comment on that, and then Michelle, I know we're going to move forward, but I also want, this is just from my own experience, that, I made a comment a moment ago about not being overwhelmed if you don't have this type of curriculum in your organization, if you have a desire to move forward. Start small. When I came into the organization, I was actually hired in as a business acumen trainer, and even within that culture, I still, was surprised by the kind of uphill battle I had to try and find that spot, right, working with my clinical colleagues to get time on the home study agenda, to get time for the workshop, to get time in the live training. So we can talk more about that, but, I started small, and then, success builds success, and was able to build off of that. So this does not all have to be done, right, immediately, but I think, to Troy's comment, do your assessment and figure out what are the most important points, right, that align with your particular customers. What are the most important business drives they have, and then see where you can start to build a curriculum to address that. So,
Amen.
Great points. Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle, in the sake of time, I think we've covered, and probably we're a little behind due to my long-windedness, so mea culpa, but I think we're good there. So,
Yeah. So, I think that Eimear, Troy, you may have spoken a bit to a couple of these questions, but maybe you could speak to anything that you're hearing from the field in terms of the pressures and how you're responding to that, or the training that you've built to help meet those challenges.
Yeah, Troy, first, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So when we talk about resources, people need to be aware of what's going on out there. And so we have all of our salespeople have access to a tool called Definitive Healthcare. For those that don't have actual access, and that we train mostly our account executives and the more senior salespeople, we will take them through, and I actually do that training at our company, and we go through kind of a crash course in a healthcare MBA, and then we go through how do you pull up critical information on different hospitals, and then what do you do with that? And that kind of gets to using data, not so much as where Jason was going with the ability to leverage data for trends and mine insights, but we are looking for ways that we can say, how might we be able to align or help this health entity? For those that don't have Definitive Healthcare, we've taken, and we now into Salesforce.com, on the account page, we have a standardized report that pulls about 70 key metrics based on their profile for what they sell. So if they're an imaging rep selling CT or MR, that kind of stuff, they get a certain profile when they log in, and they pull up that account profile. The folks that do patient monitoring have a different one like that. So that's one example of what we're providing. There's a lot of, but that's a little bit more advanced. Not everyone's going to be able to do that or have the resources of a big company like Philips. But I would bet almost everybody here is a member of something called the advisory board. And probably the easiest way for everyone to stay up on what's happening in the healthcare world, like the mergers and the earnings reports that Jason talked about, is you subscribe to the daily briefing. And most people have a universal access, for at least the companies I've been affiliated or worked with have that. So you want to sign up, get that. You can customize the reports within the advisory, and everyone wake up with everything you would need to have a healthcare business focused conversation, I guarantee you, with your customers out there like that. So those are just a couple examples of the resources that we're implementing in our sales training and providing reps to be a little bit more aware.
I'm going to jump in then and maybe build off of that. Thanks, Troy. So I totally agree with you on the advisory board. And if you're in a large organization, there is probably, as you said, a subscription, organization subscription. I'll give them a shout out for a series that they have and that I use called the Cheat Sheet series. And they basically, have basically a cheat sheet on the top topics. So whether it's in the world of value-based care, if you happen to be on oncology care first, oncology care model, the macro legislation, MIPS, all of that is there. But I'm also going to give a shout out to not only working with wonderful vendor partners and accessing what's outside that in terms of the World Like Advisory Board, but look inside your own organization. So I'm just going to give two examples of that. So right now I'm in a world, I'm in the world of COVID, right? We are a vaccine company, and it is the most dynamic space. Jason, you talked about, obviously, kind of everybody talks about the pre and post COVID world, the most dynamic space that you can be in as a trainer, because we are moving from pandemic to endemic to commercialization. So for me to think that I'm going to be able to build something to train new hires, right, or enroll hires, by the time I have it available, we've moved on to the next phase. So what I have done is, and I did this in my past organization too, look at your internal experts. And so the foundational curriculum is built around the business of vaccines in this case, but the internal experts are the ones who will be able to give you real, literally play-by-play of how the marketplace is evolving, and use your internal experts to help onboard the new people around the real market dynamics and what your customers care about and what's happening in the marketplace. And in my prior world, the same thing, but it was a podcast series. So again, for those of you who may have tight budgets, those of you who may not know really quite where to start, look inside your organization, see what some of the key issues are that you need to address from a training perspective. Get advocacy buy-in from those you need to get started, and think about something as simple as a podcast series, right? To just kind of talk through, using those who do it really well in the market, how they are successful, and to your point, like KPIs, metrics, whatever it is that they're using to help them kind of hear from their colleagues about how they might be able to, increase their own competency around the marketplace that they are in. So just wanted to build off of, it doesn't always have to be a big program. You can look inside your own organization and see what could be done quickly to meet immediate challenges, or could be done less expensively if budgets at some point are, which we've all lived in our world, are tight.
I'll put a plug in here for LTEN Excellence Awards. I'll just mention, hopefully I'm not biasing the results here since you're on the board, Michelle, here when I say this, but one of the awards that we put forward from Philips here had to do with the trainer's role being a bridge between our HEMAR, that's our health economics function, and the salespeople. And I think for all of us here, especially if you're at a more senior level, but it doesn't matter, we have a role to be translators to people who don't normally talk to customers. So those folks that do market access, the folks that break down final rules, the folks that are doing outcome studies and doing ICER calculations, they have no clue what consultative selling means. They have no clue what this looks like from a Salesforce behavior standpoint. So you get to be the interpreter, you get to be the glue and the oil in making that happen. And I'll tell you, you can make a huge impact in a company by being that person that recognizes how we're going to translate what one group already does. And everybody's got, every company here has some kind of health economics function in some way. Maybe they're under compliance, maybe they're under regulatory, maybe they're under marketing, but I guarantee you there's at least one person who knows what the value-based purchasing scores are and the domains that go into it and how to read those kinds of things. Get with that person, be the translator, and then say, hey, can you maybe join this training, or can you help me put together a podcast series or do something like that? That's what the Excellence Awards and LTEN are all about, are actions like that. And that's what we us as trainers can come out and truly change what's happening within our companies. It's a great point you made, Eimear. Thank you.
I love that term, translate, because that's what we're doing so much of the time, making it available through translation, and then obviously creating an asset that's usable.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I think the next slide we hit on in terms of the need for value-based training, the need for strong business acumen training. And I think that, you know, when we speak with our clients, we're often approached, you know, how can we go about creating a business acumen curriculum? How can we go about creating a curriculum that truly helps our representatives change their behavior and understand their customers better? So I think we wanted to dive in just to a couple of examples of that. And then I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. And please, if you have questions, be typing those into the chat feature as well. So if we could, this slide, I think, there we go. This is an example of just a generic approach to a value-based selling learning journey. So when we look at creating a learning journey, and Eimear, I know that we worked with you in terms of looking at you can create a journey in a number of different ways. You can look at it by role, you can look at it by tenure, you can look at it by content gaps, for example, that your reps or your account managers may be having in the field. But the ability to really modify that based on needs and to take, you know, a core curriculum. So in this case, you've got about 4 hours of kind of a mandatory, if you will, and then some optional modules. But the ability to really customize that for your own organization, your own roles, your own experience level, that sort of thing. I think learning journeys are an excellent approach to that. And then going into the next slide, if we could. Right. So we touched on some of the challenges, and I know, Eimear, you had mentioned, you know, that many times getting a seat at the table, that type of thing. But maybe Troy or Eimear, one of you, or Jason can speak to, you know, how the needs may be different and the differences between, you know, understanding your customer, even within your own territory, how those needs may be different.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. So at a company like Philips, we have, I don't know, I think we have 7 different types of salespeople that are out there. And some are more, have a role of account maintenance, and they don't get into many business conversations. So for them, we train to them on a general awareness, or we talk about the sustainability of the business and trying to look for outcomes there that they can bring back to the customer like that. I mentioned earlier about what we do with Salesforce.com and how we customize certain metrics for the different roles. That's another example. But another example that I didn't share was we're a customer of CMR, and CMR is built customized using their modules, training for us that we put all of our account executives through. So we don't put all account managers through it, but we put all account executives through it because they're the ones that are spending more time talking to the C-suite, doing more of the contract negotiation, spending more time at an IDN level where they need to have a higher level of understanding and competence. So for us, we just sat down and we did this with HR. We looked at talent minimums, what they had to have there. That was aligned in KPIs within the annual talent review process. And so we would put a development goal in there for those people that needed to do more. They would have different levels of training that they would have to complete in there and part of that. So just one example how we're doing it at Philips.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. So a couple of things that Troy talked about, awareness. And so the 2 words that came to mind listening to that were flexibility and proficiency, right? So you want everybody to develop proficiency at the level that they need to have, right, to be successful. And I think, Troy, you said you had 7 or 8 roles. My last organization, I think we had like 12 or 14 roles out there, right? So not everybody needed kind of this business acumen training, but awareness of it was at least good in the event that something came up, right, that they were aware. But proficiency will be different, like you said, for market access, trade and distribution than it will be for a field reimbursement manager or the sales representative, right? So the way I talked about flexibility, the way that I approached it was I had several foundational modules that were they were foundational, and everybody could get a high level. You can kind of think of the cheat sheet thing that we talked about a few moments ago, kind of a high level overview of important concepts, business concepts, or market drivers in the market. But then there was a deeper dive available on nearly all of those topics. So if you really then need to do a deep dive into the pharmacy space and understand the flow of the pill or the flow of the vial and, you know, some of the problematic areas along that journey, you could do a much deeper dive. And then also to provide assets and learnings in a variety of different modes and methods, right? So everything from the quick hit to I'm in the car driving all the time, hence the podcast series, to I need a much deeper dive, and we would develop maybe webinars, and Michelle and her team were fabulous. They were a big partner for us in building out many key elements of the curriculum, but proficiency, flexibility, right, in order to be able to modify quickly what you need for different learners.
Yeah, and Michelle, just to add one quick comment. I know I'm aware of time, this will be brief, is that the other thing I'd encourage training departments and organizations to think about as it relates to training your teams, if somebody has a propensity or a love for diving into value-based care for their customer, you know, there are folks that are going to like going in that area of healthcare, and other folks who said, hey, I was a biology major, I want to stick to the pharmacodynamics and talk about that with KOLs. You know, accelerate, you know, play to the strengths of the individual. And I would just say, I mean, I see it. I see such a big difference as I sit on, you know, one side of the table, and you see folks who really enjoy diving into kind of the economics of healthcare and trying to figure out how to help us out. Others who are so uncomfortable there that they want to be talking about other things. And maybe they're an expert in what's going on in the market because they're incredibly well networked. So try and, I think, don't treat everyone equally, right? Not to sound overly, you know, simplistic, but if you have folks who really want to dive deeply into value-based care or healthcare economics, allow them to be successful in that space and then leverage them across your enterprise or across your teams, because I think that's the way to go about it. Because not everybody, and it's not for every, you know, being a healthcare nerd isn't for everybody. I'm here to tell you, so.
Excellent point, Jason. So in the few minutes that we have remaining, I wanted to touch on just customer engagement strategies, how you see those changing as we go into now 2023. Anything that you're doing differently, anything that you see from your perspective, Jason, that may be changing, that customers need to be aware of?
I'll give one quick example, Michelle, in that we had a vendor come to us. I won't call them out. Maybe I will another time because it's a success story. And they said, let us help you grow. And we said, okay, let's talk more about that. And essentially they had a kind of a software stack that went right over our EMR that identified patients that were candidates for, in some cases, their therapies, right? And these therapies were things like valves, you know, artificial heart valves and things like that. And so, you know, so that one question of, can we help you grow? I mean, that got my attention, right? I'm responsible for growth, and so I said, sure. And we're 6 months into a partnership with them that I can tell you unequivocally will be the largest driver of our cardiovascular program, probably for the next several years. And that was because we said yes to a vendor offer to help us grow. And so I think, I mean, that's overly simplistic, but is the need of your customer to grow? Can you help them do that? Then just state that in plain language. We think we can help you grow. Can we talk about that? And I think that's a door opener, right? So that's just, you know, kind of a way to think of using your product in a slightly different way to meet the needs of a key performance indicator of the health system.
Fantastic. Troy, Eimear, any engagement strategy?
Said, I think the example was wonderful. It's the bottom line, meet your customer where they're at, right? And it goes back to everything that we were just talking about, right? Do your homework, understand the marketplace, you know, become your whatever level of proficiency you need to get to in order to be able to ask the right questions and listen with intent, and then come with what you can provide, you know, from whatever it is that you are, you know, selling that can potentially be a solution for them. In this case, it was a growth, but that's probably what I would add. For well said, Jason.
I'll just say I love that they started in Jason's example with a question. Clearly they had done their homework. So if you think of the challenger sales model, they had an insight, they knew where they were going. They used a great positioning question, closed-ended question that sets up the follow-up. Jason made the decision, okay, I'll take the bait, and got permission to be able to go. That's the question behind the question 101 strategy. I'll just tell you at Philips, we're focusing on anti-PowerPoint. we in doing a review, we realized that our measure of effectiveness, even though this is not any of our domains, was how big and how fancy of a freaking PowerPoint could we put together. And Jason, I would imagine if somebody was coming in to pitch you, you'd want to see at what most 5 slides, 6 slides.
Yeah.
If maybe.
I kudos on that direction, Troy, because it's where we need to go. So yeah, great
Amen.
work.
Great points. And we have reached the bottom of the hour. I want to take just a moment to thank the panelists today. You've provided excellent directional feedback and your thoughts, and I appreciate everyone, your willingness to share with us today. So thank you all very, very much. Tim, I will turn it back over to you for closing thoughts, and please send us any questions that we did not have time to answer, and I will send those to the panelists and we'll get those answered for you. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
Great. Michelle, thank you very much, and thank everybody. That was a great conversation. We really appreciate you sharing with us. Folks, as Michelle said, if you are typing questions, if you have questions we didn't get to, please do keep typing them in. We'll be here for a few more minutes, and we will get you answers offline. Just as we're closing out, I wanted to share some LTEN information with you. This is that calendar of events I mentioned earlier. It's what it looks like currently. This does change quite a bit, so you should always visit the LTEN website regularly and even bookmark the calendar to be aware of the newest events and programs and networking and learning opportunities we have coming up. Most importantly, this year is our annual conference taking place June 12th to 15th in Phoenix, LTEN 2023. We'd love to have you join us for that. You can find out more information, view the current agenda, etc. on ltenconference.com. And if you do plan on joining us, the early bird discount is running through March 10th, so it's your best time to join. And finally, speaking of joining, I'm going to invite you to join us all for our next webinar. We'll be back here this coming Tuesday, the 21st, talking about training and onboarding made simple and scalable. We have some other programs planned this month and early into next month. There's going to be even more that you see on this list. You can always keep an eye on the programs at register at l-10.org/webinars. Here's the address for the Self-Directed Learning Library. Today's recording is going to be housed there probably about an hour or so from now, so you can look for that there. And CMR is going to be following up with you as well with a copy of the recording and some other resources. And finally, there's my email address showing up there. If I can help with anything, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. So just let me go ahead and close out. Everybody, again, thank you for joining us. Let me thank our speakers again, Michelle O'Connor, Jason Gaines, Eimear Kivlighn, and Troy Prehar. And let me thank our sponsors, CMR Institute. And let me thank all of you for your time, attention, and participation in today's discussion. Look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your week, a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.